The chamber was enormous, built to hold beings of every size and shape from across the galaxy. Jiwoo stood at the center of it, feeling very small. Around her, the Academy Council sat in a wide circle. Some of them had wings, some had scales. Some looked like walking crystals that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. One of them was made of something that looked like purple smoke held together by willpower. Jiwoo was the only human in the room. She was also the only human in her entire class at the Galactic Military Academy. That made her special, but not in a good way. It made her different. It made her alone. The War Master stood up. His name was Thress, and he looked like a giant insect crossed with a suit of armor. His voice clicked and buzzed when he spoke, but the translator in Jiwoo's ear turned it into words she could understand. "Cadet Jiwoo of Earth," Thress said, "you have completed all standard training. You have passed every test. Now comes the final trial, the Crucible of Vex Prime." Jiwoo had heard stories about Vex Prime, every cadet had. It was a dead moon orbiting a dead planet. Thousands of years ago, a civilization had built weapons there. Defense systems. Killer machines that never stopped, never tired, never forgot. That civilization was gone now, but their machines were still working, still killing. "The trial lasts 72 hours, Thress continued. You will be dropped on the surface with minimal equipment. Your goal is simple, survive. The defense systems will hunt you. They have been hunting cadets for 300 years. They are very good at it." Another council member spoke up. This one was covered in blue fur and had too many eyes. "We must inform you of the statistics, Cadet. We have sent 847 cadets to Vex Prime over the last 3 centuries. Only 17 survived without preparation. 2%, Thress said. His mandibles clicked together in what might have been sympathy. "You understand these odds, yes?" Jiwoo looked at him. Then she looked around at all the other council members. They were waiting for her to be scared. They were waiting for her to ask if she could refuse the trial. Some of them probably expected her to cry. 2%? Jiwoo said. "What am I supposed to do with the remaining 98? The chamber went silent. Jiwoo could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She hadn't meant to be funny. She genuinely didn't understand what they wanted her to do with those numbers. Thress leaned forward. "I believe there is a translation error. We are saying that you have a 2% chance of survival, a 98% chance of death." "I heard you," Jiwoo said. "I'm asking what I should do with that 98%. Because I'm planning to be in the 2%, so the rest seems like wasted math." One of the council members made a sound like water boiling. Another one's crystals chimed like broken bells. They were surprised, maybe even shocked. An instructor stood up from the observers section. His name was Kellis, and he had been teaching Jiwoo hand-to-hand combat for 6 months. He was tall and thin, with skin like dark leather and eyes that glowed faintly gold. "War Master, I request permission to speak," Kellis said. Thress waved a bladed arm. "Speak, instructor. I have trained this human. She does not misunderstand the odds. Her species has a different relationship with statistics than most of us." Kellis looked at Jiwoo, and something that might have been pride crossed his face. They acknowledge probability, but they do not accept it as fate. "That is illogical," said the crystal being. "Yes," Kellis agreed. "It is completely illogical. It is also very, very human." Thress studied Jiwoo for a long moment. "Very well, Cadet. You will deploy to Vex Prime in 3 standard days. Use that time to prepare. Dismissed." Jiwoo saluted and left the chamber. Her legs felt weak, but she kept her back straight and her step steady. She had learned that much at the academy. Never let them see you shake. Outside the chamber, someone was waiting for her. Hana was Jiwoo's bunkmate and the closest thing she had to a friend at the academy. Hana came from a species that looked like someone had taken a lizard and stretched it until it could walk on 2 legs. Her scales were green and gold, and they rattled when she was nervous. They were rattling now. "I watched from the observation deck," Hana said. "Jiwoo, are you insane? You basically told the War Master you don't care about the odds." "I don't," Jiwoo said, walking toward the dormitory wing. "The odds don't change what I have to do. I still have to survive for 72 hours. Knowing that most people die doesn't help me stay alive. But preparation helps," Hana said, following her. "Standard preparation. The cadets who survive use combat augmentation. They use advanced weapons. They get orbital support and real-time tactical data. You're human. None of that technology works with your biology. The Academy doesn't even have combat data on humans yet. You're going in blind." They reached their shared quarters. Jiwoo dropped onto her bunk and stared at the ceiling. It was made of some material that looked like metal but felt warm to the touch. Everything at the academy was like that. Alien, foreign, wrong in ways she couldn't quite explain. "Then I'll have to figure it out myself," Jiwoo said. Hana's scales rattled louder. "How can you be so calm?" "I'm not calm," Jiwoo admitted. "I'm terrified. But being scared doesn't change anything. I either survive or I don't. I'd rather spend 3 days figuring out how to survive than 3 days being scared." Hana sat on her own bunk across from Jiwoo. "Your species is very strange." "Yeah," Jiwoo said. "We get that a lot." That night, Jiwoo couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk and thought about Vex Prime. She thought about the machines that had been killing for thousands of years. She thought about the 2% survival rate. Then she thought about Earth, about humanity, about all the times humans probably should have died but didn't. Ice ages, plagues, wars. Humans had survived all of it, not because they were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they were too stubborn to quit. Jiwoo got out of bed and went to the Academy's data archives. She spent hours reading failure reports from previous Vex Prime trials. She read about cadets who died in the first hour, cadets who lasted 2 days before the machines found them, cadets who followed every rule and still ended up dead. She noticed something. Every single one of them had tried to fight the defense systems using standard military tactics. They used their weapons until they ran out of power. They took defensive positions and waited for rescue. They did exactly what their training told them to do. And they died. Jiwoo leaned back in her chair and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that the game was rigged, but had also figured out how to cheat. The machines on Vex Prime had been killing soldiers for 3,000 years. They had seen every weapon, every tactic, every strategy that the galaxy's military minds could create. They had adapted to all of it, but they had never seen a human who was desperate, angry, and too stubborn to die according to schedule. Jiwoo started making a list. Not of weapons she would bring. A list of things she could make from basic survival gear. A list of tactics that no sane military instructor would ever approve. A list of ways to survive that had nothing to do with training, and everything to do with being willing to do whatever it took. When she finally went back to her bunk, the sun was rising over the academy. Hana was still asleep, her scales quiet and still. Jiwoo lay down and closed her eyes. 3 days until Vex Prime. 72 hours to survive when she got there. A 2% chance of making it back alive. Jiwoo fell asleep thinking about that 98% and how much she was going to enjoy proving it wrong. The Academy's supply depot was a massive warehouse filled with equipment from 100 different worlds. Jiwoo walked through the aisles, ignoring the advanced weapons and armor that other cadets would kill for. She was looking for simpler things. A technician watched her pick up a coil of monofilament wire. "That's for equipment repair," he said, his 3 eyes blinking in confusion. "Not combat." "I know," Jiwoo said, adding it to her collection basket. She grabbed fire suppression canisters, medical tubing, reflective emergency blankets, a bottle of industrial adhesive, things that made the technician's confusion grow deeper. "Cadet, are you preparing for the Vex Prime trial or a camping trip?" Jiwoo smiled. "Yes." She spent the next 2 days in the Academy's workshop, building things that made Hana nervous. A slingshot made from elastic tubing and synthetic bone. Smoke bombs made from the fire suppression canisters and chemical compounds from the medical bay. Trip wires that were nearly invisible. A crude grappling hook fashioned from scrap metal. Hana watched her work with growing concern. "Why are you making primitive weapons? The Academy will give you a plasma rifle, energy blades, thermal charges, things that actually work." Jiwoo didn't look up from the slingshot she was adjusting. "Those things work against normal enemies. The machines on Vex Prime have been fighting plasma rifles for 3,000 years. They know how to counter them. They know the range, the heat signature, the sound they make, but they've never fought a slingshot." "Because slingshots are useless," Hana said. "No," Jiwoo corrected. "They're unexpected." "That's different." Other cadets heard about Jiwoo's preparations. Some of them came to watch. Most of them laughed. One of them didn't. Tae Yang was the only other human at the Academy. He came from the military colonies, places where humans had been soldiers for generations. He was bigger than Jiwoo, stronger, and he had spent his entire life training for combat. He looked at her primitive weapons and shook his head. "You're embarrassing us," he said. "Humans have only been part of the galactic community for 30 years. We're still proving ourselves. And you're going to Vex Prime with a slingshot and some smoke bombs? When you die, they'll remember that. They'll remember that humans can't handle real combat." Jiwoo looked up at him. "When I survive, they'll remember something different. You really think you can survive with toys?" "I think the machines expect soldiers," Jiwoo said. "I'm not going to give them what they expect." Taeyang left, but his words stayed in Jiwoo's head. He was right about one thing. Humans were still new to the galaxy, still proving themselves. If she died on Vex Prime using stupid tactics and primitive weapons, it would reflect on all of humanity. But if she played it safe and died anyway, that would be worse. Instructor Kellis found her that evening in the workshop. She was testing the slingshot's range, firing ball bearings at a target across the room. She was getting good at it, accurate enough to hit a target the size of a sensor cluster from 20 meters. "Interesting choice of weapon," Kelly said. "It's quiet," Jiwoo explained. "Doesn't have a heat signature. Doesn't use power that can run out. And it's small enough that the machines might not even register it as a threat until it's too late." Kelly's picked up one of her smoke bombs. "You've been reading the failure reports." "All of them," Jiwoo confirmed. "Every cadet who died on Vex Prime followed their training. They used standard tactics. They fought the way they were taught to fight. The machines were ready for them. And you believe being unpredictable will save you?" "I believe being predictable will definitely kill me," Jiwoo said. "So yes, I'm going to try being unpredictable instead." Kellis was quiet for a moment. Then he set down the smoke bomb and looked at her seriously. "I need to tell you something, Cadet. After your meeting with the Council, I accessed some classified files. Earth's military history. I wanted to understand how humans fight. And? It disturbed me," Kellis admitted. "Your species has been fighting wars since before you had advanced technology. Thousands of years of conflict. And the pattern is always the same. When humans face superior enemies, when the odds say they should surrender or die, they do something else. They improvise. They adapt. They refuse to accept defeat even when logic demands it." Jiwoo shrugged. "We're stubborn." "It's more than that," Kelly said. "Other species calculate risk and withdraw when the odds are poor. It's logical. It's how you survive as a species. But humans seem to have evolved differently. You acknowledge the odds, but you don't let them control your actions. It's simultaneously foolish and magnificent." "Is there a point to this?" Jiwoo asked. "The point is that I believe you might actually survive Vex Prime," Kelly said. "Not because you're well-trained or well-equipped, but because you're human. And humans have a very annoying habit of surviving things they shouldn't." After Kellis left, Jiwoo continued her preparations. She studied maps of Vex Prime, but she knew the maps were probably outdated. The machines controlled the terrain. They could change it. She needed to be ready for anything. Hana came in later with food from the cafeteria. "You need to eat," she said. "Starving yourself won't help." Jiwoo took the food gratefully. It was some kind of protein cube and vegetable paste. Not great, but edible. "Thank you." They ate in silence for a while. Then Hana spoke quietly. "I looked up human history. After you kept talking about Earth, I wanted to understand." "And?" "Your species is insane," Hana said, but there was something like awe in her voice. "You nearly wiped yourselves out a dozen times. Climate change, nuclear weapons, diseases, wars over resources. But you survived all of it. Even when your scientists said extinction was inevitable, you found a way. Like I said, we're stubborn." "It's more than stubborn," Hana said. "My species would have given up. We're logical. When the numbers say something is impossible, we accept it and move on. But humans don't. You look at impossible odds and say, 'Watch me.'" Jiwoo smiled. "Yeah, that sounds about right." "I'm scared for you," Hana admitted. "The trial is tomorrow and I don't think your plan is going to work. But I also can't explain why I still have hope that you'll come back." "That's the human effect," Jiwoo said. "We make people believe in impossible things." That night, the Academy held a traditional ceremony for cadets about to face the trial. It was meant to be an honor, but it felt more like a funeral. Jiwoo stood with the other cadets while instructors spoke about courage and sacrifice. Thress gave a speech about how every cadet who faced Vex Prime whether they survived or not, brought honor to their species and their academy. Jiwoo barely listened. She was thinking about sensor patterns and kill zones, and how to turn a fire suppression canister into a distraction device. After the ceremony, cadets came up to say goodbye. Most of them didn't expect to see her again. They were polite about it, but Jiwoo could see it in their eyes. They had already written her off as dead. Taeyang approached her one last time. "I still think your plan is stupid," he said. "But good luck anyway. Try not to die too quickly." "I'll do my best to die slowly and dramatically," Jiwoo said. "Really give them a show." For a moment, Taeyang almost smiled. Then he nodded and walked away. Jiwoo went back to her quarters. Hana was already asleep, or pretending to be. Jiwoo lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling one last time. Tomorrow she would be dropped on Vex Prime. Tomorrow the machines would try to kill her. Tomorrow she would have to survive using nothing but her wits, her stubbornness, and a collection of primitive weapons that no respectable soldier would touch. The smart thing would be to be scared. The logical thing would be to doubt her plan. But Jiwoo had spent her whole life ignoring what was smart and logical in favor of what was necessary. Earth had taught her that. Humanity had taught her that. When the universe says you can't win, you smile and prove it wrong. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, 2%. What a waste of 98%. Then she slept, dreaming of a dead moon and machines that were about to learn why humans were the galaxy's most annoying species to kill. The dropship was small and cold. Jiwoo sat alone in the passenger compartment, strapped into a seat designed for beings much larger than her. Through the viewport, she could see Vex Prime growing larger. It looked dead, gray and cratered and lifeless. Perfect place for a trial that killed 98% of participants. The pilot was a mechanical being, all circuits and metal. It spoke without turning around. 30 seconds to drop. You are equipped with standard survival pack, 1 plasma pistol with 2 charge packs and 1 energy blade. Trial duration is 72 hours. Good luck, Cadet. Thanks, Jiwoo said, checking her gear one last time. Hidden in her survival pack were her homemade weapons. The slingshot, the smoke bombs, the monofilament wire. Everything the Academy didn't know about because she hadn't listed it on her equipment manifest. 10 seconds. Jiwoo took a deep breath. Her hands weren't shaking. That surprised her. She had expected to be terrified. Instead, she felt calm, focused, ready. Drop. The floor opened beneath her, and Jiwoo fell. The harness system controlled her descent, bringing her down to the surface of Vex Prime in a controlled fall that still made her stomach flip. She landed hard but rolled with the impact, coming up in a crouch with her plasma pistol drawn. Silence. The moon's surface was covered in dust that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Ancient ruins rose around her, buildings made of materials that should have crumbled long ago but somehow still stood. The sky was dark, lit only by the dim light of the distant sun. Jiwoo activated her communication device. Cadet Jiwoo landed safely, beginning trial. A response came immediately. It was Kelly's. Acknowledged, Cadet. Orbital sensors are tracking you. The defense systems will detect your presence soon. Move quickly. Jiwoo started moving. She had studied the maps enough to know that staying in open areas was suicide. The automated turrets had perfect sight lines in open ground. She needed cover, complexity, places where the machine's advantages became liabilities. She found a collapsed building and slipped inside. The interior was dark and filled with rubble. Perfect. She started setting up her first trap. Monofilament wire stretched across a doorway at ankle height. A smoke bomb rigged to trigger when the wire was disturbed. Nothing sophisticated, but it didn't need to be sophisticated. It just needed to be unexpected. 20 minutes after landing, the first drone found her. She heard it before she saw it, a high-pitched whine like angry insects. It came through the doorway fast, scanning for targets. It hit the monofilament wire. The smoke bomb exploded, filling the room with thick gray clouds. The drone's sensors went haywire, trying to find her in the smoke. Jiwoo was already moving, circling around behind it. She pulled out her energy blade and drove it into the drone's power core. The machine died with a shower of sparks. One down, About 1,000 to go. Jiwoo didn't wait around. The other machines would have detected the fight. They would come to investigate. She grabbed the dead drone's optical sensor, pried it loose with her blade, and stuffed it in her pack. Maybe she could use it later. She moved deeper into the ruins, always staying in cover, always moving unpredictably. The machines were fast and strong, but they followed patterns. They checked obvious hiding spots. They assumed their prey would try to escape. Jiwoo didn't try to escape. She tried to confuse them. She found a cluster of old solar panels, their surfaces cracked but still reflective. She used her energy blade to cut several free and positioned them at angles throughout a ruined plaza. When the next hunter-killer machine came looking for her, its targeting lasers bounced between the mirrors, creating a dozen false readings. It spun in circles, trying to identify which reflection was the real target. Jiwoo shot it with her slingshot. A ball bearing moving at high velocity struck its primary sensor cluster. The machine staggered, half blind, and Jiwoo used the energy blade to finish it, 2 down. In the orbital observation deck, Instructor Kellis watched with growing amazement. Next to him, Thress leaned forward in his seat. "What is she doing?" the War Master asked. "Improvising," Kelly said. "She's not fighting them directly, she's creating chaos and exploiting it." Another council member, the crystalline being named Buell, was taking notes. Her tactics don't match any known combat doctrine. She's using environmental factors as force multipliers. She's turning the machine's sensors against them. "It won't last," Thress said. "The defense network will adapt. It always does." On Vex, Prime Jiwoo was beginning to understand the true scope of what she faced. The machines weren't just randomly hunting her. They were learning. Each encounter taught them something. They were starting to check for traps, starting to avoid the mirror tricks. She needed to stay ahead of them, always one step ahead. Hour 36. Jiwoo had been moving constantly, barely stopping to rest. Her plasma pistol was down to half charge. She had decided to save it for emergencies. The energy blade was more reliable, but it required getting close to the machines. Too close. She found a defensive position in what looked like an old bunker. The walls were thick and there was only one entrance. She could rest here for a few hours, maybe even sleep if she was careful. She was setting up an alarm system using some loose debris when she heard something. Not the whine of drones or the heavy footsteps of hunter-killers. Something else. A deep, rhythmic thrum that made the ground vibrate. Jiwoo looked out through a crack in the bunker wall and saw something that made her blood run cold. A combat walker. 3 stories tall, covered in armor and weapons. It moved on 4 legs, each one thick as a tree trunk. She had read about these in the reports. They were the defense network's heavy units, deployed only when the smaller machines failed. No cadet had ever survived an encounter with a combat walker. The machine stopped in the plaza outside the bunker. Its sensor array swept the area methodically. Jiwoo pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. If it found her here, she was dead. The bunker wouldn't protect her. Nothing would protect her. The walker's sensors passed over the bunker. Jiwoo waited for alarms, for weapons fire, for death. Instead, the walker turned and walked away, its footsteps fading into the distance. Jiwoo allowed herself to breathe. That had been too close. She looked at her homemade weapons, the slingshot, the smoke bombs, the monofilament wire. They had worked against drones and hunter-killers, but they wouldn't work against a combat walker. She needed something bigger, something the machines wouldn't expect. She started going through the dead machines' components she had collected. Drones had small power cores. Hunter-killers had bigger ones. If she could find a way to overload them, to chain them together, maybe she could create an electromagnetic pulse. It would be crude and unstable and probably had a good chance of killing her. But it was better than nothing. Hour 48. Jiwoo had survived longer than 60% of previous cadets. The betting pools at the academy were in chaos. No one had expected the human to last this long, especially not with her primitive tactics. Hana watched from the observation deck, her scales rattling with nervous energy. "She's still alive," she whispered to Buell, who was standing next to her. "Yes," Buell said, his crystalline structure chiming softly. And she's adapting faster than the defense network. I've been tracking her movements. She never uses the same tactic twice, never retreats to the same location. She's creating a pattern of randomness which shouldn't be possible but somehow is. On Vex Prime, Jiwoo was putting her new plan into action. She had found an area with several disabled machines. She couldn't tell if previous cadets had destroyed them, or if they had simply broken down over centuries. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they still had power cores. She spent 2 hours carefully extracting the cores and wiring them together using components from her survival pack. It was delicate work. One wrong connection, and the whole thing would explode. She would have approximately 0 seconds to regret her mistake. When she was done, she had something that looked like a mess of wires and glowing energy cells. It wasn't pretty, but according to her calculations, it would generate a massive electromagnetic pulse when activated, big enough to disable every machine within 100 meters, also big enough to potentially kill her if she was too close when it went off. Jiwoo smiled grimly. She had told the council she was planning to be in the 2%. She hadn't mentioned how many stupid risks she was willing to take to get there. Hour 52. Jiwoo was exhausted, injured, and running on determination alone. She had burns from energy weapons, a fractured rib from an explosion, and cuts all over her arms from crawling through debris. But she was still alive, and she had found something interesting. While running from a pack of hunter-killers, she had stumbled into a section of the ruins that seemed different, more intact, more important. The machines guarded it heavily. That meant there was something here worth guarding. Jiwoo studied the area from a distance, noting patrol patterns and sensor coverage. In the center of the complex was a structure that hummed with power. A relay station, maybe, or a command node. Whatever it was the heart of the defense network. And Jiwoo had just figured out how to stop a heart. Jiwoo spent 3 hours watching the central complex. She counted patrol routes, timed sensor sweeps, and mapped every entrance she could see. The machines were thorough. They had been protecting this place for thousands of years, and they were good at it. But they were also predictable. That was the problem with machines that had been doing the same job for millennia. They fell into patterns. They optimized for efficiency. They stopped expecting the unexpected because nothing unexpected had happened in centuries. Until now. Jiwoo waited until the patrol cycle reached its longest gap, 43 seconds between sensor sweeps. It wasn't much time, but it was enough. She sprinted across open ground, diving into cover just as the next sweep began. The sensors passed over her hiding spot without detecting her. She was inside the perimeter. The next part was harder. She had to cross 3 more open areas, each one smaller than the last, each one more heavily guarded. She used every trick she had learned: smoke bombs for cover, mirrors to confuse sensors, pure speed when there was no other option. A drone spotted her during the last sprint. Alarm started screaming. Jiwoo didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She threw her last smoke bomb behind her and kept running. The central structure loomed ahead. Up close, it was massive. The walls were covered in strange writing from the civilization that built this place. Power conduits glowed with energy that had been flowing for thousands of years without interruption. Jiwoo found an entrance. The door was sealed, but it was old. She jammed her energy blade into the seal and pried. The blade overheated from the effort, but the door cracked open. Machines were coming. She could hear them. Hunter-killers and drones and worse things. She squeezed through the gap and pushed the door closed behind her. Inside, the structure was like the heart of a sleeping giant. Power cores the size of buildings pulsed with light. Control systems that had been managing death for 3,000 years hummed quietly. And in the center of it all was the relay node. It was beautiful in a terrible way. A sphere of pure energy suspended in a lattice of crystal and metal. Every defense system on Vex Prime connected to this point. Every machine, every weapon, every sensor. This was what kept them running. This was what made them unstoppable. Jiwoo pulled out her homemade electromagnetic pulse device. It looked pathetic compared to the ancient technology surrounding her. A crude collection of scavenged parts and desperate hope. She set it down next to the relay node and started the activation sequence. The device began to hum, building power. She had 60 seconds before it detonated. 60 seconds to get as far away as possible. The door exploded inward. Hunter-killers poured through, their weapons targeting her immediately. Jiwoo ran, She didn't have a plan beyond putting distance between herself and the coming pulse. She just ran, dodging energy blasts and jumping over debris. A shot caught her in the leg, burning through her uniform. She stumbled but kept moving. 30 seconds. She reached a corridor that led deeper into the structure. Maybe she could find another exit. Maybe she could get far enough away that the pulse wouldn't kill her along with the machines. 20 seconds. The hunter killers were right behind her, their weapons charged up for killing shots. Jiwoo threw herself around a corner and pressed against the wall. 10 seconds. She closed her eyes and thought about Earth, about home, about all the humans who had survived impossible things because they were too stubborn to accept death. The pulse detonated. The sound was indescribable. Like reality itself was screaming. The electromagnetic wave tore through the structure, through the defense network, through every machine on Vex Prime. Systems that had run for 3,000 years without failing suddenly went dark. The silence that followed was absolute. Jiwoo opened her eyes. She was alive. Somehow the structure's walls had shielded her from the worst of the pulse. She was hurt, burned, and could barely walk, but she was breathing. She limped back to the central chamber. The relay node was dark. The power cores were offline. The hunter killers that had been chasing her lay motionless on the ground, their systems fried. Jiwoo activated her communication device. Cadet Jiwoo to orbital command. Defense network is offline. I repeat, defense network is offline. There was a long pause. Then Kellis's voice came through and he sounded shocked. Confirmed, Cadet. We're reading 0 active defense systems across the entire moon. What did you do? I turned them off, Jiwoo said. She sat down heavily against a wall. How much time do I have left in the trial? Another pause while Kellis checked. 20 hours and 17 minutes. Good, Jiwoo said. I'm going to sleep. Wake me up when it's time for extraction. In the orbital observation deck, chaos erupted. The entire Academy Council was standing, staring at the sensor displays that showed a completely inactive defense network. It shouldn't have been possible. The Vex Prime defenses had been active for 3 millennia. Hundreds of cadets had died trying to survive them, and 1 human had turned them off. Threst turned to Kellis. Explain what just happened. She didn't try to survive the defenses, Kelly said slowly, still processing what he had witnessed. She defeated them. She found the central relay and destroyed it with a homemade electromagnetic pulse device. That's not how the trial works, another council member said. Cadets are supposed to evade and survive, not assault the command structure. No one told her that, Kelly's pointed out. And technically, the trial rules only state that cadets must survive for 72 hours. They don't specify how. Buell, the crystalline observer, was reviewing his notes with growing excitement. I've documented 73 distinct tactical maneuvers she used. None of them appear in any military database I have access to. She invented an entirely new approach to asymmetric warfare in 3 days. Hana's scales were chiming like bells, a sign of intense joy in her species. I told you she would survive. I didn't believe it, but I told you. Tae-yang stood in the back of the observation deck, his expression unreadable. He had expected Jiwoo to fail, had wanted her to fail in a way, because her success would prove that his traditional military training wasn't as important as he thought. But watching her survive through pure, stubborn determination, he felt something else. Pride. She had proven that humans belonged in the galaxy not because they could follow the rules, but because they could rewrite them. On Vex Prime, Jiwoo slept. She dreamed of Earth, of home, of a planet where humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars by refusing to accept that survival was impossible. When she woke up, her leg hurt worse than before. The burn had gotten infected. She used medical supplies from her pack to treat it, but it would need proper attention soon. She had 20 hours left. She spent part of that time exploring the central structure, documenting what she found. The civilization that built Vex Prime had been incredibly advanced. Their technology was far beyond anything the current galactic community could create, and Jiwoo had broken it with scrap parts and determination. She also spent time thinking about what came next. She had survived. That was good. But she had also destroyed an ancient and irreplaceable defense system. Some people would see that as vandalism. Others would see it as an unacceptable risk. Jiwoo decided she didn't care. She had been given a trial with a 2% survival rate. She had asked what to do with the remaining 98%. Now everyone knew the answer. You use that 98% to prove the odds were wrong. The extraction ship arrived exactly on schedule. The pilot's mechanical voice sounded different this time, almost respectful. Cadet Jiwoo, please proceed to extraction. Point. Jiwoo limped out of the structure and into the gray light of Vex Prime. The landscape looked the same as when she arrived, dead, cratered, lifeless. But it felt different now, less threatening. More like a battlefield she had won. The extraction ship landed and Jiwoo climbed aboard. As they lifted off, she looked down at the ancient ruins one last time. Somewhere down there, the machines she had defeated lay dormant. Maybe forever. Maybe until someone figured out how to restart them. But for now they were silent. And Jiwoo was alive. The trip back to the academy took 3 hours. Jiwoo spent most of it sleeping, her body finally giving in to exhaustion now that the danger was past. When she woke up, they were approaching the station. Through the viewport, she could see the academy's lights. Thousands of cadets from hundreds of species, all training to serve in the galactic military. All of them would hear her story. All of them would know that a human cadet had not just survived the impossible trial, but had defeated it completely. Jiwoo smiled. She had come to the academy as the only human in her class, an outsider, a primitive species from a backwater planet. She was going back as something else entirely, as proof that humanity had something unique to offer the galaxy. Not superior strength or technology, just a fundamental inability to accept defeat. The ship docked and Jiwoo stood up despite her injuries. She straightened her uniform and prepared to face whatever came next. The door opened and Kelly's was waiting with a medical team. Welcome back, Cadet. You need immediate medical attention. I know, Jiwoo said. But first I need to know something. Did I pass? Kellis looked at her with those glowing gold eyes. Then he smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien features but was unmistakably proud. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of healing equipment. Jiwoo lay on a bed that adjusted itself to her body, wrapping her burns in regenerative gel and repairing her fractured rib with sonic therapy. It should have hurt, but the doctors had given her something that made the pain distant and unimportant. Hana sat beside her bed, scales shimmering with relief. You scared everyone. When the defense network went offline, half the council thought you were dead. They assumed the machines had killed you and then shut down as some kind of security protocol. Nope, Jiwoo said sleepily. Just me being difficult. You destroyed a 3,000-year-old defense system with parts from a survival kit. And a lot of stubbornness, Jiwoo added. Don't forget the stubbornness. The door opened, and Instructor Kellis entered with War Master Thress. The giant insectoid had to duck to fit through the doorway. They both looked serious. Cadet Jiwoo, Thress said formally. The Academy Council has completed its investigation of your trial. We have reached several conclusions. Jiwoo tried to sit up, but the medical bed held her down gently. Am I in trouble for breaking the defense network? That is one of the topics we need to discuss, Thress said. You were sent to survive the trial, not to destroy the testing facility. The Vex Prime defenses have been in continuous operation for 3 millennia. They were considered an irreplaceable training resource. Jiwoo's stomach sank. I'm sorry. I didn't think about it that way. I just wanted to survive. However, Kellis interrupted, the trial rules do not prohibit destroying the defense systems. They only require survival for 72 hours. You survived for the full duration. Therefore, you passed. More than passed, Thress said, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. You are the first cadet in Academy history to not only survive the trial, but to neutralize the threat entirely. The Council has reviewed your tactics and we have cataloged 73 distinct maneuvers that do not appear in any known military database. I made most of it up as I went, Jiwoo admitted. Yes, Bayul said, entering the room behind Thress. His crystalline body chimed softly as he moved. That is precisely what makes it remarkable. You engaged in pure adaptive warfare. You assessed each situation, identified available resources, and created solutions in real time. It's a form of tactical thinking we haven't seen before. Thress continued. The Council wishes to offer you immediate graduation with full honors. You have demonstrated combat capability beyond what we require of standard cadets. You could begin your military service immediately. Jiwoo was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. I appreciate the offer, but no. I want to finish the full training program like everyone else. Why? Thress asked, genuinely curious. You have proven yourself far beyond the requirements. Because I got lucky on Vex Prime, Jiwoo said. I survived because the machines didn't know what to expect from a human. But next time I face an enemy, they'll know. They'll have studied my tactics. They'll be ready. I need to be better than I am now. I need proper training. Kelly smiled. A wise answer. However, Thress said, you should know that your actions on Vex Prime have attracted significant attention. Military strategists from 24 species have requested copies of your trial footage. Some are calling your approach revolutionary. Some are calling it reckless, Buell added, but even they admit it was effective. Over the next week, Jiwoo recovered from her injuries. The regenerative medicine worked quickly and soon she was back on her feet. But everything had changed. Other cadets looked at her differently now, some with respect, some with fear, some with suspicion. She was no longer just the only human at the academy. She was the cadet who beat Vex Prime. Tai Yang approached her in the cafeteria 3 days after her return. He sat down across from her without asking permission. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. I said you were embarrassing humanity with your primitive weapons and tactics. I was wrong. You were scared, Jiwoo said, understanding in her voice. We're the first humans here. You wanted to prove we could handle advanced technology and sophisticated tactics. You wanted to show that we belong. And you proved we belong by doing the opposite, Taeyang said, by showing that humans don't need to copy everyone else. We have our own strengths. Stubbornness and stupidity, Jiwoo said with a smile. Adaptability and determination, Taeyang corrected. I've been reading the analysis reports. Do you know what the military theorists are saying? They're saying that humans might be the only species in the galaxy that evolved to fight asymmetric warfare. We spent millennia fighting enemies stronger than us. Predators, nature, each other. We learned to win not through superior force but through refusing to quit and finding creative solutions. That sounds better than stubbornness and stupidity, Jiwoo admitted. It's the same thing, Taeyang said, just with better words. Classes resumed, but Jiwoo found herself pulled into special sessions. Instructor Kellis wanted her to document her tactics. Biol wanted to interview her about her decision-making process. Other instructors wanted to understand how she had remained calm under such extreme pressure. I wasn't calm, Jiwoo kept telling them. I was terrified the entire time. But you didn't let the fear control you, Kellis pointed out. That's the crucial difference. Other species, when they experience fear, they freeze or flee. It's a logical response to danger. But humans seem to have a different relationship with fear. You feel it, acknowledge it, and then do what needs to be done anyway. We call it courage, Jiwoo said. We call it insanity, Kellis replied. But perhaps they're the same thing. Within a month, news of Jiwoo's trial had spread throughout the galactic community. Military academies from other species contacted the Academy Council, asking for information about human combat capabilities. Some wanted to recruit human cadets. Others wanted to study human tactical thinking. The Academy Council decided to create a new program, Human Adaptive Warfare, they called it. A course dedicated to studying and teaching the tactics Jiwoo had used on Vex Prime. She was asked to help develop the curriculum. Hana found her in the library one evening surrounded by notes and tactical diagrams. You know you're famous now, right? There are cadets who traveled from 3 systems away just to attend the academy because they heard about what you did. That's terrifying, Jiwoo said. It's impressive, Hana corrected. You changed things. Before you, humans were seen as primitive newcomers. Now they're seen as a species with unique strategic value. I just wanted to survive a trial, Jiwoo said. I didn't mean to start a revolution. The best revolutions are always started by people who just wanted to survive. Hana said wisely. 6 months after Vex Prime, Jiwoo was called to a ceremony. The Academy Council had decided to update the Yue Memorial Plaza, where they honored cadets who had made significant contributions to military science. A new plaque was being installed. Jiwoo stood before it with the entire Academy watching. Thress gave a speech about courage and innovation. Kelly spoke about how one cadet had redefined what was possible. Then they unveiled the plaque. Jiwoo expected it to have her name, her achievement, maybe a list of her accomplishments. Instead, it simply read, they told her 2%. She asked about the other 98%. Jiwoo felt tears in her eyes. It was perfect. After the ceremony, she returned to her quarters. Hana was there, preparing for the next day's classes. They were both still cadets, still training, still learning. Do you ever think about Vex Prime? Hana asked. Every day, Jiwoo admitted. Not the fighting, not the fear. I think about the moment I decided the odds didn't matter. That was the moment everything changed. What made you decide that? Jiwoo thought about Earth, about human history, about ice ages and plagues and wars, about all the times humanity should have died but didn't. Because humans have a saying, Jiwoo said. When someone tells us something is impossible, we hear it as a challenge. We don't ask if it can be done. We ask how long it will take us to do it. That's very human, Hana said. Yeah, Jiwoo agreed. It really is. Years later, Jiwoo graduated from the academy with full honors. She went on to serve in the Galactic military, where her tactics were studied and adapted by strategists from every species. She became an instructor herself, teaching new cadets that survival wasn't about following rules or accepting odds. It was about being too stubborn to quit, too creative to be stopped, too human to accept defeat. The defense network on Vex Prime was never rebuilt. Instead, the moon became a monument, a place where cadets could visit and see where one human had proven that impossible was just another word for difficult. And every year, new cadets would stand before that plaque and read the words. They told her 2%. She asked about the other 98%. Some of them understood immediately. Others took time to learn. But eventually, they all came to the same realization. In a galaxy full of species that calculated odds and accepted logic, humanity offered something different. They offered hope. They offered determination. They offered the fundamental belief that any problem could be solved if you were willing to be creative, stubborn, and just a little bit crazy. Jiwoo sat in her instructor's office years later, reviewing applications from new cadets. There were more humans now. Dozens of them, all eager to prove themselves at the academy.